Hey everyone, welcome to Lab 1. In this lab, we'll be getting to know Azure Resource Manager with Bicep. If you've heard of AWS CloudFormation, this is the Azure equivalent. This lab is pretty much beginners friendly. It takes about 1 hour to complete, and by the end of this lab, I'll make sure you understand how to use Bicep Templates to deploy and update infrastructure in Azure. Basically, in this lab, we'll be creating 2 virtual machines, 2 security groups, and we're going to be connecting them inside a single virtual network. And then we'll save like a web page from one of the virtual machines. So let's get started. So I'm going to start by explaining this diagram so we have like a good understanding of whatever it is we're trying to build, and so that's we're building, you're able to follow through. So at the top level, we have the virtual network in Canada Central over here, and we have a single subnet. And inside the subnet, we're going to be deploying 2 virtual machines, which we can see here. So anyone can be your virtual machine 1 or your virtual machine 2, but the idea is that we have 2 virtual machines. Virtual machine 1 is going to be created in our first deployment, and it is going to be protected by our network security group. Actually, both of them are, but one of them will be protected by NSG that allows for SSH, and then the other one is going to be added later as an update. And the other NSG is going to allow for HTTP traffic. That's why like one of the diagrams here, or one of the arrows here, has like the HTTP connection, and then the other one is going to allow for SSH. So in this lab, we are writing this as infrastructure as code using Bicep, and Azure Resource Manager takes our Bicep template. So we're going to be having the template. It's going to take the template, and the template is going to be compiled into ARM JSON file. And then when we compile this, we're going to create like ARM deployment. So it's the deployment that actually provisions the resources that we have here, virtual machines, and in the NSG, the subnet, the virtual network as well. Also, not to forget, we also have our managed identity over here. So what the managed identity does, it is going to be assigned to the virtual machine, so it allows for the virtual machine to be able to securely access other Azure resources if need be. In subsequent labs, I'm going to be explaining more of the concept that we see here, so do not be worried. Okay, so we can get started. So before we get started, I know one of the problems that we face is when we tend to do labs, or when we tend to build stuff like this, we always think around what is the use case, how is this going to be used in the long term. If I'm learning this, how is it going to be, or where can I apply this? Not to worry, so I'm just going to give a very simple use case. So for example, imagine we're running a startup. Let's say it's called like Food Hub, and in the startup, of course, we're going to be having engineers. Let's say we have the dev team, and the dev team is requesting for, or they're trying to build a dev server, right, which is going to be private for just the engineers. Then, which means that we can have like we can create a virtual machine, right, with just SSH access. So which means that it's just going to be private for the engineers to access. And then let's say in a few months, we want to launch the software. We want people to be able to come to the platform, browse menu, and order food. So we cannot say, okay, let's create a new virtual machine, and then we cannot allow the other virtual machine to be accessed by the public, So by separating them, what will happen is that we can keep one private, we can keep one public, and both of them are actually going to be in a secure virtual network, right? And since all of this is going to be defined in the Bicep template, it's easy for us to redeploy it. It's easy for us to update the environment without having to do that manually. So we can just, update the template, and then when we deploy, it's going to, deploy the environment or provision like the other resources that we need based on the requirements and based on the specifications in the template. Okay, so let's get started. So first of all, we want to create our resource group. Okay, so we can go to portal here to create our resource group. So I can create a new resource group. Call this RG Bicep Lab. And And yes, like in our diagram, it's in Canada Central, so we want to make sure that, or we're sticking to that, or whatever location you want to use is actually fine. So we can just create. Okay, so by the time you begin this lab, I mean, I've created the resources that you need. We have like the Bicep template here, and then we have the updated template as well. So just take out time to go through the Bicep template and then go through the updated template. But in the template, we have the parameters. All have been described in the README file, but we have the parameters we're going to be using. And like basically we have like the username, and yes, we also have the VM name prefix, we have the VNet address prefix, we have the subnet prefix and whatnot. Okay, and then we also have like the different resources that we're going to be creating. For example, as the diagram says, we're going to be creating the virtual network, we're going to be creating the subnet, the public IP, NSG, which is the network security group, and all of those. So all of them, the network card, the network interface card, all of them are described here. The virtual machine are described here. So yes, and again, we also have like the output, which I'll also show you when we create this resource, the output from the deployment of these resources. Okay, so we're going to, so we can kick off by creating that now. Okay, we've seen that in deploying this, right? So we've been able to see all the details from our deployment. We can see the virtual machine. We can see the network interface. We can see the public IP address, NSG with the SSH, the one that we deployed first, and then we have the virtual network. And yes, that's pretty much it. So yes, so instead of us having to create all these things manually, we were able to just deploy it using the Bicep template. So what we had done was with the Bicep template, right, we needed to convert it to JSON because it requires us to have the template in JSON. So we converted it with the command which I had copied from the repository to build the Bicep template or the Bicep file and to convert it to the main.json. So we've been able to create this. So if I come to output, right, I can see this is the VM name, which is this, and then the public IP address, this is it, right? So we can actually gain access to the virtual machine. So just to give you a sample of this, so if I come to, so I can open my virtual machine in the resource group and I can connect to it, right? So like I mentioned, this first one is private just for the engineers with the example that I gave. So we are not having a public IP address for this. We basically have a private IP address, which means that we are going to gain access, or the public can gain access to this virtual machine, just the engineer. So for us to gain access to it, let's try to connect using Bastion. So we can connect. Remember that when we were creating, we needed to download the private key, so we can get that. So we have our username as Azure user, and then from the local file we can go to downloads and it should be there. So this is it, and then we can connect. Okay, so in this way we are able to connect to the private virtual machine by connecting using Bastion, right? So moving on, let's try to upscale. Let's say we're trying to scale the system in such a way, like I mentioned, we want to have another virtual machine and another NSG where the public can gain access, to that particular virtual machine, and making sure that HTTP is allowed, right? So we can go back and we can deploy a custom template as well. So this. So we can copy this same one. Could also come here. So we could copy this, right? It's the same thing. The only difference is just the name of the file. Okay. Right. So we can open it. Copy this. Okay, so in this case, we don't need to generate a new key, so we can use the existing one that has been stored previously, and then the name is lab VM key. Then we can create and review. Okay, so now in this case, when it's done, you can see that we have both the virtual machine deployment is in progress. Okay, so we have the virtual machine 1, and then we also have the virtual machine 2, right? So all of them. Then if we go to the outputs specified, we can see the virtual machine name, first one, the second one, and then we have the IP address for both of them. Okay, so if I go to our resource group, we can get to the virtual machine 1, and of course it doesn't have a public IP address, but there's something I want to show you. So if we go to the, again, back to the virtual machine 1, and then we go to the network settings, so we can see that this allows for SSH, right? Then if we go back and then try to get to the second virtual machine, which we have created, this one, so if we come to the network settings, it's supposed to give us access, exactly. So we're going to have access to call this over the internet through HTTP 80. So what we're going to do is that we can get the public IP address. We can copy the public IP address right here, and if we get the public IP address, so it's going to, if we try to call it, it's going to time out, right? It's going to time out because we basically have nothing on, or nothing serving on the virtual machine. So what we're going to do is that we're going to run a command, or we're going to install Nginx, right? So basically we can search for run command right here, run shell script, and shell, we can come here to just install Nginx, right, and enable it so we can run this. Okay, so we can try to reload this. Okay, and then we said it's in port 80. Okay, it's still running, so let's give it some time. Script execution in progress. Exactly. So this is it. Okay, so this is, yes, so it's successful already. So we can see that it was successfully installed. So we have our Nginx welcome page. So the NSG rule worked, and then the virtual machine is live, which we were able to deploy to like a mini web server with Bicep. Okay, So for every lab we do, once you are done doing the lab, of course, we need to make sure that we clean up. Very important to save resources. Okay, so to clean up, we have to just come to the resource group, right, and delete resource group. And then we can just type out or just copy and paste to delete the resources that have been created. So there you have it. This lab one, we were able to create and deploy infrastructure using Bicep, right? And then we were able to update it to add new resources where we wanted to add the second virtual machine and the second NSG. And we were able to verify that everything worked by serving a web page from the virtual machine 2. From the virtual machine 1, we were able to gain access to it by connecting through Bastion. And then finally, we are cleaning up. Okay, so if this lab was helpful, please like the video and subscribe. All the resources, the templates and instructions are all available on GitHub. So this is the kind of lab where you can do by yourself. And if you fall into any, or if you run into any issues, you can reach out to me personally, or you can leave a comment. So I'm going to leave the link in the description for the link to the GitHub. Feel free to reach out to me if there are any issues, and feel free to try out the lab by yourself. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next lab.